Welcome back to The Explainer. Today, we're jumping right into a really fascinating piece of academic research. We're looking at a brilliant literary analysis of Paulo Coelho's famous novel, 11 Minutes. It dives deep into the paradox of commercialized intimacy and sacred sex, tackling huge, complex themes like womanhood, bodily autonomy, and spirituality. So let's just get right into it. Before we actually get into the chapters, we really need to talk about the impressive academic foundation of this work. Believe it or not, this is a Bachelor of Studies, or BS English level research project. It was produced at the Department of English at Government Akhtar Nawaz Khan Shahid Degree College KTS, which is proudly affiliated with the University of Harpur. I mean, the level of research here for a bachelor's degree is just phenomenal. It shows a profound engagement with some very complex sociological and literary theories.
So who's behind this? The researcher is Hamza Khan, who carried out this extensive study under the dedicated supervision of Mr. Muhammad Umar. And this wasn't just a paper handed in quietly. It was rigorously defended in front of an expert committee. We're talking external examiner Professor Dr. Muhammad Farooq, a lecturer from the University of Haripur's Linguistics Department, and internal examiner Professor Danish, a lecturer over at GOVT Akhtar Nawaz Khan Shahid Degree College KTS. Oh, and get this. This outstanding research work was even selected to be presented at the JMC Level Science, IT, and Arts Exhibition 2026, held on April 28th at the Government Postgraduate College in Haripur. Really impressive stuff.
Okay, here's our roadmap for this explainer. We'll be following the thesis structure exactly. Chapter 1 sets up the academic context, Chapter 2 introduces our narrative subject, Chapter 3 explains the lens or methodology used, Chapter 4 dives into the findings, and Chapter 5 brings us to the resolution. Let's hit it.
Chapter 1. The academic context.
Here, the researcher lays out the main objectives and asks our first central question. How can sexuality, specifically commercialized intimacy, be interpreted as both a source of severe exploitation and a catalyst for female empowerment in Coelho's novel? It's a massive paradox, right? It totally challenges our everyday assumptions.
Building on that, the second major research question looks at the protagonist's actual journey. It asks, what feminist perspectives are reflected in her transformation from seeking physical pleasure to achieving a literal spiritual awakening? It's really about reclaiming the body as a source of divine knowledge, looking way past just the surface level of physical intimacy.
Moving right along to Chapter 2, the narrative subject.
To really get this analysis, we have to know who Maria is and trace her story chronologically. Her journey kicks off at age 15 with her first love, which kind of leaves her confused about affection and desire. Then, moving into early adulthood, economic pressures push her into prostitution, and this is where she faces immense psychological fragmentation, basically separating her soul from her body just to survive day to day. But then, the turning point. She meets Ralph Hart, a painter who doesn't just see a prostitute, he sees her inner light and wants a real emotional connection. This sparks a huge awakening for her. By the end of her story, Maria fully asserts her agency. She chooses love and dignity, completely leaving those exploitative systems behind to actively reconstruct her own identity.
All right, Chapter 3, the lens.
So, how did the researcher actually study Maria's life? They used a qualitative and interpretive theoretical framework. Basically, that means no numerical statistics or surveys here. Instead, it's all about deeply exploring the emotional, psychological, and moral experiences constructed within the text. It acknowledges that things like empowerment and stigma are socially constructed and really need to be interpreted within their specific cultural context.
The data collection and analysis followed some very clear, methodical steps. First, a comprehensive, super close reading of the primary data source, the novel itself. Next, the researcher identified and extracted key passages that highlighted Maria's internal conflicts and spiritual awakenings. Finally, for the data analysis, these texts were evaluated using secondary sources and a postmodern, sex-positive, feminist framework. This specific lens is so crucial because it views female sexuality not just as a tool of patriarchy, but as a real, viable avenue for a woman's own agency.
Now for the really juicy part. Chapter 4, the findings.
This is where the data analysis directly answers those core questions we brought up earlier. First up, how is sexuality portrayed with a dual nature? Well, the thesis extracts a clear answer. Commercialized intimacy acts as a total paradox. On one hand, it's absolutely a site of harsh exploitation. Maria faces moral condemnation, economic pressure, deep objectification, and severe psychological fragmentation.
But wild as it sounds, it simultaneously becomes a battleground for empowerment. Within these intense restrictions, she negotiates her own sexual autonomy, sets firm emotional boundaries, and actually finds a medium for genuine human connection.
To put that into perspective, let's look at a direct quotation extracted right from the thesis. Maria literally says, "I am a housewife and a prostitute doing battle with each other." Wow, that perfectly captures the internal conflict she's going through. She has to constantly suppress her true feelings, completely dividing her social identity from her lived physical experience just to do her job. It's a really profound look at the exhausting emotional labor caused by societal labels.
Now, addressing the second research question about her spiritual journey, the analysis reveals that Maria's story definitely doesn't end in exploitation. As her emotional depth grows, she finds that experiencing pure vulnerability, rather than just a physical transaction, makes her feel unexpectedly free. Her intimacy literally transforms from basic physical survival into this ego-dissolving, profound spiritual growth. And we see this beautifully confirmed in another quote highlighted by the researcher. Maria realizes that the body can speak the language of the soul, bringing her closer to God. This specifically hits on the sacred sex framework of the thesis. It proves that physical sensation, when it's finally tied to genuine emotional recognition, opened up pathways to divine understanding for her, totally bypassing all that societal guilt and shame.
And that brings us to Chapter 5, the resolution.
This concluding chapter powerfully summarizes the entire scope of the research. It clearly establishes that female sexuality is a dynamic, complex social and emotional journey, not just some fixed biological instinct. It proves Maria is never just a passive victim. She's a resilient woman actively reconstructing her identity. Ultimately, the research highlights the broader struggle for female autonomy within restrictive structures, showing us that real empowerment peaks only when a woman can seamlessly integrate her sexuality, her emotional needs, and her life choices.
As we wrap up this explainer, I really want to leave you with a question inspired by this incredibly vibrant and thought-provoking thesis. If someone can find profound spiritual awakening and reclaim their dignity in a space society labels as entirely exploitative, how might our own rigid, everyday labels be limiting our understanding? Are we judging before we actually understand? Ask yourself how fixed definitions might be keeping us from grasping the deeply complex realities of womanhood, autonomy, and intimacy. Thanks so much for hanging out with me for this deep dive. Keep questioning everything, and I'll see you in the next explainer.